Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a good day. The sun is shining, hopefully. I'm Jeff Curran. I'm the founder of Energy Live News, along with my compatriot Sumit Bose. But he's doing something else, and so I'm here for you. And I'm going to be here. It's a real treat, actually, today, because what we're going to be talking about is a real-life study of how companies have saved energy, carbon, and cost. It's got a very grand title of why baselines and BMSs aren't enough and why appliance-level control is the future. Now, I'd like to be able to explain what that all means, but I've got actually three people that are much more clever than me. And those people are Anna from RO Group, Jim from PKF Francis Clark, glad I got that right, and Adam Wright from Measurable Energy. And I'll let them all introduce themselves properly as we get further into this. So what I'd like to do is please feel free to ask questions as we go along. Everyone's happy to answer questions. If it doesn't feel relevant for the relevant slide or what we're discussing, then I'll hold it to the back. And then please, before you leave us, if you can rate the webinar to make sure that we're doing the right job for you as an audience, and also give us valuable feedback. So enough of me, you don't need to hear from me. So Adam, why don't I pass over to you and let's crack on.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm Adam Wright. I'm the product director at Measurable Energy, and at Measurable Energy we use some very smart sockets to learn the appliance use of a building and the energy patterns in that building, and then automatically turn off all the things that are wasting energy. And I'm gonna start by sort of taking you through a little bit of a look at some of the things that we've been finding in these buildings, and also we've got some of our customers here to be able to talk about this with you. So why is building energy control broken? We've got lots of various different energy use going on in a building. You've got HVAC systems, lighting systems. There's your plug power, various different things drawing energy in that building. But one of the big challenges with any energy reduction is the whole justifying what you've been able to save. And what we're seeing more and more is that static baselines are just becoming quite unreliable, and we're going to go into that in a bit more detail in terms of why that's right. We're also going to touch on a little bit how a BMS is designed to really optimize your building, but there are blind spots within it, and there's places where those can be improved. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the challenges with how you can save energy in these places that are outside of that BMS, and how going right down to the individual appliance is a strong way of being able to save that energy rather than a circuit level. So I just want to kind of take you through why this matters, why is this important, and that is because in the work that we've been doing, we've seen that 40% of a commercial building's energy use is coming through plug power. And that is the appliances that are plugged in, the appliances that are wired in, say through fuse spurs, so electric heating, water heating, anything that's cooling, but also just all of the things that you would get in an office or any other commercial building. So, fridges, printers, meeting rooms, desks. And within that, what we're seeing is that up to half of that is wasted energy, stuff that gets left on overnight, at weekends, in hybrid working patterns when people aren't in that building. And this is a real blind spot in BMSs. That there isn't a BMS that integrates plug power into kind of daily energy use. And this means that this bit is the part that's getting unnoticed, and it's adding up. So let's kind of go into what's happening here, and I'm kind of going to go back to that sort of energy baseline, and we've got these three things. We've got this place where we're missing energy. We've got how do we justify the savings that we're getting there, and it all comes back to sort of baselining. And the issue with this is that if we take an energy baseline over any period, say a month, and then compare it to another month, no 2 months are ever the same. The realities of the workplace that we're in now is that occupancy changes, weather shifts, equipment it gets used differently, heating is used at different amounts, cooling is used different amounts, and what you end up getting is a baseline that you're comparing against that isn't necessarily representative of what's happening on a daily basis. And going right down to the individual appliance level and calculating savings from that one appliance, and then amalgamating it up and looking at these various different parts. So what that appliance is doing, how much energy it's using, what the historic pattern is when it's not in use, allows us to get a much better and dynamic sort of saving calculation over time. And what this means in reality is that many of these dashboards that we're looking at, where we're comparing against baselining, is not an accurate representation of what's happening in that building right now. We go and target right down at that appliance level, and it allows us to see some of these hidden things that are happening there. So sort of high risk plug loads like heaters, fans, vending machines, and I'm going to come into kind of later sort of about some of these other areas that the value could provide. But I think a really good sort of place to go would be to sort of having a look at how this is being taken on at a landlord level. And I think, Anna, it'd be a really nice time to sort of feed in what you guys have been seeing over our RO group.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Adam. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anna Badgery, Head of Sustainability of the RO Group. RO Group are a family, third generation family-run investment operator, investing in a multitude of different diverse assets as well. As part of our real estate division, we have a history of investing in assets, refurbishing them, taking them to a level that are highly optimized for our tenants in terms of energy efficiency, but as well as social impact. I wanted to bring Silbury House as a case study to this webinar today, and hopefully we can all start to see some of the variations that Adam talked about in terms of where small power comes into play when operating and managing a building. Silbury House, just a bit of context and background, is a building located in central Milton Keynes. We actually procured the building in 2019. Prior to that, it was a single let tenant. We decided to take quite a significant refurbishment project with this particular building, bringing sustainability right at the heart of the refurbishment strategy. It's one of the projects where we decided that we were going to integrate a holistic approach to sustainability, not just looking at energy, which obviously is the topic of today, but actually encompassing well-being, social impact, community engagement, and wider implications when it comes to refurbishing a building for future generations. So we wanted to add an element of legacy to the building as well. Without a doubt, a significant proportion of our overall impact in terms of the environment and carbon emissions come from the built environment, about 40%. And obviously a huge significant impact from that comes from buildings themselves. So as part of our strategy during the refurbishment, it was critical for us to address how we're going to minimize negative impact on the environment and make sure that we bring energy efficiency to the forefront for this particular building. We've looked at it from an operational efficiency as well. So it's no longer just a nice to have in terms of sustainability features. They're becoming imperative as part of corporate strategies. But it's also important for us when we're looking to operate in the building after it's been refurbished to make sure that we are minimizing costs, both to ourselves as the landlord, but also to our future tenants as well. Silbury House has demonstrated throughout its refurbishment its ambitions when it comes to sustainability. So we've achieved several green building credentials following the refurbishment. So we're currently BREEAM outstanding. We've elevated the performance, the EPC performance rating from an E before the refurbishment to now EPC A. We've also focused, as I mentioned, on the wellbeing strategy. So we're Fitwell 3-star certified, and we've also heavily invested on optimizing air quality throughout the building. So we've integrated sensors throughout the building to make sure that air quality is consistently at a high level to improve occupant wellbeing. When it came to the strategy of looking at small power, we did assess how we performed across our entire portfolio from a real estate perspective, and we actually looked at and we noticed about 30 to 40% of our energy being attributed to plug power. So it was absolutely critical for us as part of the strategy to incorporate a strategy that looks at specifically plug power. Our relationship with measurable energy started before Tilbury House refurbishment, but it was a really good practice for us to start to see how measurable energy can support us in our wider strategy for this particular building. So we decided to install 100 measurable energy devices throughout the building. And the intention there was to directly target plug power, but also to communicate the benefits that this has to tenants. So just looking at this slide here, thanks for that, Jeff. I've been able to pull a report off the dashboard from Measurable Energy to look at how we've performed in the last 12 months. Minded a small caveat, the building wasn't at 100% occupation in this period of time. But even so, we were able to see some significant savings in terms of energy, carbon emissions, but also costs. So you can see there, we've saved 140 kg of carbon emissions, which obviously in essence is not a huge significant impact in the grand scheme of things, given that we're trying to save wherever we possibly can in terms of our impact. It's significant enough for us to be able to demonstrate the cost savings as well as the energy saving attributed to the sockets. For us, it was also about addressing the behavioural change. We wanted to refurbish and create the most sustainable office building in Milton Keynes. But we also wanted to make sure that once tenants came into occupation, we're able to sustain that operational efficiency that I talked about earlier. So with measurable energy plug sockets, we've got the light, which again targets that behavioural shift. It invites people to think consciously about the impact that they're having in the environment. So, for example, when the plug socket is green, it addresses and it prompts people to think that actually the carbon intensity in the grid is renewable, and therefore they're able to plug into the socket. But it also allows them to start thinking more consciously about their behaviours if that light goes amber or red. And for us, it's critically important as part of our engagement strategy with our tenants to make sure that these nuances are validated and are demonstrated throughout their tenure within the building as well. For us, it's not just a case of we're now going to hand the building over to our tenants and we're going to walk away. As conscious and responsible landlords, we want to continue maintaining engagement with our tenants. It was critically important for us to install a solution that allows us to present consumption data in the way that we're able to get from measurable energy from the dashboard itself as well. Throughout the building, we've added signs to prompt, again, tenants to give them an insight about what these measurable energy sockets mean and how they can then look at different rule sets within their own devices, again, prompting them to think more consciously about energy consumption. And without a doubt, it allows us to communicate to our tenants that actually there's a very clear relationship and a correlation between saving energy and saving CO2 and saving costs. So we're able to demonstrate that reduction to our tenants as well. As I say, it's critically important from a sustainability perspective. Obviously, I'm talking from a personal level here in terms of our own corporate strategies and our main goal of being a responsible landlord and investor, that when we are reporting on sustainability, the measurable energy dashboard is a key tool in terms of my own toolkit, where I'm able to demonstrate our own reductions as part of our wider sustainability strategy in terms of our impact. And as I say, we will continue evolving and learning and engaging with our tenants to make sure that these reductions are sustained throughout the period that they occupy the building. So without a doubt, there's huge value to us from a landlord perspective, holistically, from a sustainability strategy perspective, but also some direct results in terms of operational efficiency as well.
Anna, while you just take a breath there, would you say you're an unusual landlord? A lot of landlords are happy to pass the costs on to the tenants, but it sounds like you've got a bit more. You're sort of looking to almost as if it's your. I mean, I know it's your building, but you're not. You're trying to help the tenants. Doesn't seem to necessarily be the case with other maybe property management or landlords out there.
I mean, I can't obviously talk about other landlords, but we are seeing a transformational shift in terms of sustainability strategies and becoming embedded as part of the wider property or asset strategies. I think from our perspective, it's actually completely embedded in everything that we do and stand for when it comes to sustainability. It's very closely related to our own family values as a business, but also we've made sure that actually sustainability strategy, property strategy become one of the same thing. So we're embedding sustainability in everything that we do and stand for. And I think strongly as a sustainability professional, I would say that sustainability is good for business, and there is a huge element of profit and business. And it's really important for us to have this, because as part of our asset management conversations, we are seeing more and more tenants placing value on some of these principles. So there is a return attached and attributed to this. When our tenants are looking at their own real estate decisions, or when they're looking at different demises to be able to let out, we're seeing a transformational shift when it comes to the appetites of future tenants. So it's really important for us to have a strategy that delivers to those future and evolving needs. Which is why I mentioned particularly around delivering a building and continuing to engage with our tenants to deliver to that. Silbury House has attracted tenants that place sustainability at the heart of what they do as well. So a solution like Measurable Energy is able to support them in their own reporting strategies as well. Given that this doesn't necessarily form part of our scope 1 and 2 for the entire portfolio, I would say that we're also readily available to support our tenants when they've got to do their own reporting strategies, or when they're going through an ISO, or when they're going through a B Corp. It's really important for us as a landlord to be able to provide the data that they need to make the decisions that they need to make and the reductions that they need to make.
So actually, you're giving them some added value in the sense of you're taking out some of their issues around compliance, etc.
We're supporting them in that journey, without a doubt. And obviously, what it means for us is we've got a highly sustainable building that we operate and manage. It's a two-way street with sustainability. We can't do it on our own. As I said earlier, we may deliver the most sustainable building, hopefully, and we have the ambition to do that consistently in our portfolio, but it needs to work the same way once tenants come into occupation. So it's a two-way street, this one. So we help our tenants, and obviously our tenants help us as well in the long run when it comes to reporting.
I'm sure there'll be other landlords that are looking in. Would you say that by taking this approach, you've actually had higher occupancy rates, higher number of tenants coming in? Is it possible to say that, or is that more anecdotal?
Well, I would say for Silbury House itself, it's quite hot of the press in terms of recent announcements. We've recently announced a new tenant that's come on board. Again, it's been very strategic in the way that we've marketed. We've worked very closely with our agents to market Sustainably House for what it is in terms of its sustainability credentials. So we've attracted tenants that are forward-thinking, are looking at sustainability, are placing it at the heart of what they're doing. We have seen an increase in terms of rental premium increase for this particular building. Again, the size of it is probably not comparable to some of the other bigger projects, but I would say that there is value out there. There is data to suggest that there is a premium attached to sustainable, energy efficient buildings. And I would say that by placing sustainability at the heart of the asset management strategy, as well as the engagement with agents and the marketing strategy, we've been able to draw out some nuances that demonstrate value.
Okay, that's great. I'll let you continue, or are we going back to Adam? We're moving on to Jim.
I'm just going to move to just to make sure captured some of the stats on the next slide. So again, I think this moves quite nicely on to Jim, but just to demonstrate the savings and achievements that we've delivered at Silbury House there. But I would say we are assessing this across our portfolio. We've had measurable energy sockets installed in one other asset in Watford. So I'm constantly in the ME dashboard trying to get the data. So I would say anybody that's got a sustainability hat on, where data is extremely important to you and you want an evidence-based approach, then I think speaking to the measurable energy team would be a good step.
Actually, Adam, while we got you here, the dashboards, are they like a standard feature, or are they bespoke? How do they all happen?
Yeah, sure. So our dashboard is really very, very simple. It's it's a landing page where you're able to see the energy consumption at whatever time period you want to look at, and then where we add a bit of the complexity is all the kind of the customization is in how you generate your report and the different pages that you get. So if someone purely wants to see energy use, energy reduction, that's an option that's selectable. If they purely want to see carbon or other values in there, like occupancy or information about safety around the sockets, have there been high amp events going on? It's customizable, so different stakeholders can get out of it what they would like.
And just to add to that, actually, again, from a reporting perspective, the granularity of it is quite important. So it allows you to drill down demise for demise, socket per socket. So when I'm looking at energy across the portfolio, energy consumption across the portfolio, I'm able to then address if I can see there's been any anomalies, or if I can see that the rule sets have slightly changed. So it's the granularity for me. And again, I'm so sorry, because not everybody thinks about data in the same way that I do. But the granularity of allowing you to be able to see consumption socket for socket, I think just gives us that added bit of certainty about decisions that we can then make.
Anna, you're just a data nerd, is what you're saying.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. But unfortunately, you have to be, because we want to make sure that our decisions are being driven by data. You can't change something that you don't know. So I think measure for us is extremely important.
Does this mean that Big Brother is watching? If I go and sit at a desk and then I'm sort of twiddling along and doing loads of different things, that you can go, "Oi, Jeff, you're wasting energy."
I think rather than Big Brother is watching, it's more about highlighting some changes that we can all consciously make. I think everybody starts with the right intentions. That's the point. I think it's all about, we all start off with the right intentions. And sometimes, just going back to the original points that Adam made about, the BMS doesn't show you everything. So this has the ability for you to then be able to make decisions on information where you might not have necessarily had before. And again, it's all about that data transparency and making sure that together we're taking the right decisions.
I'm going to go into that data. Sorry, Jim, I know we will get to you, but this is quite interesting, actually. From a data perspective, when you first put this in place, Anna, what were there things that really surprised you in terms of some of the stuff that you could see and find out about?
I won't use Silbury House as a case study for that particular question. I'll go back to a building where we've had plug sockets installed prior to Silbury House. It's one of our assets in Watford. And again, similarly to Silbury, we were very much driven around the sustainability strategy there. What did surprise me is how much we leave things on. So we had meeting rooms, for example, where we had TV monitors in the room, and they were constantly on standby. So then I'd go back to the dashboard and see actually that meeting room hadn't been used, like hardly ever. So we had small power wastage there. Or for example, we were able to do with the measurable energy team, we were able to do a walk around and actually see, do we actually need to have these sockets at all if they're not being used? So it enables you through the data and through the monitoring to see exactly what power you're actually using. And then is the rule sets for me in that particular building that changed my perception around this, because we didn't have any rule sets, and therefore just by adjusting some of the rule sets around areas that weren't being utilized at all made a significant impact. It didn't make any impact on operations, so people could carry on using the building and demise as they used to, but just allowed us to add those nuances and be a little bit smarter about the energy that we're using. When it comes to Silbury House, I would say that the numbers are not surprising me. I think it's quite consistent with the overall standard data that we see in terms of 30 to 40% of it being plug power, and actually we're hopefully saving about 30% of that.
That's fantastic. So in terms of the rule sets, you mentioned, and I know Adam, you've mentioned rule sets. What do you actually mean by rule sets? Are these like office procedures or something to do with the actual sockets themselves?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So this is the mechanism for how things get turned on and off. So predominantly the system is looking to automate as many of these as possible. So find periods of time where there is absolutely no need for those appliances to be on, and the rule set then will turn off those set sockets for over those periods and then turn them back on. And it's kind of it's a really good point, Anna, in terms of not interfering with the operational side of the business. In that our goal is always to do that, to turn off after people aren't there anymore, so they don't notice them going off because they're not needed, and turn on before people come back, so that the people the next day don't need, or after that time period don't actually know that was happening. But there is also that kind of manual ability. So we, as smart as the system can be, there's always a human in the loop kind of principle, and there's things that on those walkarounds and the people in the building notice. Do I really need to have this on? Do we need the coffee machine running 24/7? Do we need those printers there? Do the meeting room TVs need to always be on? It's those kind of things that then those little pieces can add into it, and when it happens all over the place, this all adds up.
Okay, so the interesting thing there is that you've actually got control of individual sockets, and in effect are you creating the rule and then you're sticking to the rule, or I mean, I'm assuming AI can come into play somewhere along the way as well, can it?
This is it. So this is the perfect application for AI. Taking some energy use data, looking at patterns, and then turning stuff on and off. The fact that essentially the system is able to then see what the occupancy of the business of that building is based on the energy use, means that those on-off times can be adjusted on right down to a kind of a daily basis if they need to be. And this is how we sort of tackle the hybrid working kind of scenario. So if you take like a circuit-based system, you would need to pre-program it and tell it you are turning off at these times. And if one person needs something on that circuit during that time period, then the whole thing has to be left on. So you end up just leaving loads of things on because you can't turn everything off. But at this granular kind of level, it's fine if one or two desks need to stay on. And we can do that by detecting active energy. And then the rest around can be turned off. And the things that are wasting energy in the kitchen can be turned off. So it's about being smarter and more dynamic with the kind of the working environment that we're in now.
Okay, we've had a question actually, because obviously we've been speaking about offices pretty much. So James, thank you very much, James, for the question. Application appears to be office environments only. Does it readily transfer over to large single-span workshop warehouse spaces? Good question, actually.
Yeah, really good question. Yeah, we are focusing in here on offices a little bit, but yes, this system is installed in manufacturing facilities, in schools, universities, hospitals, laboratories, hospitality spaces, modular buildings. There's all sorts of application use for it. It depending on what appliances it's going on, that it might be tweaked a little bit. There are obviously some appliances in places like manufacturing that are on single phase or three phase that we're not controlling with this. So there's a bit of an adjustment in terms of what it goes on. But yes, this is used across a lot of different applications.
Okay, brilliant. Jim, you're sitting here. So we've got another couple of questions, but I think they can wait a little bit. So bear with me. Mm-hmm. Jim, why don't we talk about actually, you're a tenant with RO Group. Yep. Hopefully they're giving you good rental, good prices. Shouldn't say that. Sorry, Anna. Do apologise. So Jim, why don't you talk us through what happened with you?
Certainly. Morning, everybody. My name is Jim Solomon. I'm Regional Facilities Manager for Francis Clark. We're a firm of financial advisors and accountants across the Southwest. We've got 8 office locations. We are, as mentioned, we are a tenant of RO in our Bristol office, and it was that relationship that led us to an introduction to measurable energy. For some context, Francis Clark didn't have an FM facility prior to my joining the firm about 2.5 years ago. The last 2 years have been heavily focused on sustainability. We have just submitted our B Corp application, and this has sort of sparked interest in looking into ways we can change how we work. We're obviously a service provider. We're not a huge consumer of we don't make anything. We're not a production company, etc. We're just a firm of accountants in offices. But We do have a lot of equipment that runs on small power, and therefore this was a very interesting option when I was approached by it. We rolled this technology out in our Bristol office, which was the unofficial guinea pig, if you will. And based off the back of the savings we were seeing on that data, we essentially, or I took this then to our board and got approval to roll out to all of our sites, which was fantastic. So we're currently at around 504 devices or sockets deployed, and we probably are going to hit around 800 or 900 by the time we finish rolling out by September time this year. We are obviously seeing some great data, as Anna and Adam have been talking about, with regards to that slide there. You can see with regards to our reduction in consumption, and this all feeds into our overall journey that we've just started as well for a carbon net zero by 2035 as a firm. And it's been broken down into sort of bite-sized phases, and our first 3-year phase, the smart plug technology plays a large part in that. We've got renewable energy sources in one of our offices as well, which we're looking to expand on. So yeah, it's been a turbulent couple of years with regards to a lot of goals being set, but we are on a really, really good path. A B Corp, we're literally waiting at the moment with fingers crossed, but we are submitted, and we're just waiting for that to come through. So yeah, that's sort of the brief background.
Yeah, Jim, can I ask a question? So the measurable energy sockets, why did they appeal? What was it because they were easy, or because they were something that has in the face of the users? What was the reason for
there
it?
Was a couple of reasons. I think I personally am a bit of a self-confessed techie fan. I like.
Okay, so you're a tech nerd. I've got a data nerd. I'm the presenter nerd.
my whole house is controlled by Alexa.
Okay.
So there was this. It was a by chance introduction to measurable energy, and I was just sort of drawn to the innovative tech in the sockets. What I didn't realize at first is how much you can expand that. So we've got sockets controlling obviously all of our desktops. So that's all of our monitors and all of our docking stations and all the rest of it. We've also got it in all of our meeting rooms. So as Anna touched on about, meeting room TVs and camera systems and things like that. But we've also got them on our fridges. So, we're turning fridges off at night for 3 or 4 hours because you can, nothing's going to perish in that period of time because nobody's opening and closing them. We've got a lot of electric heating. We've got a lot of under counter boilers that are constantly boiling and cooling and boiling and cooling. So we really rolled it out to as much of the infrastructure as we could, that you just can't have somebody turn it off and then come and turn it back on again. So that was very appealing to me, as well as the obvious savings and impact on our carbon footprint.
Can I ask, in terms of the return on investment period?
Yeah.
What's let's say one socket, and it obviously saves a certain amount of energy. What's the payback period? Are you looking at a year, 3 years, 5 years? What sort of period?
Well, ours is because our offices vary so dramatically in size. We've got some with 10 people in and some with 150 people in. That payback varies, but I'd say looking at the average, it's probably 24 months, probably 2 years payback. There is obviously the ongoing cost of this technology with subscriptions. So you pay your subscription per your device, but your net savings are still we're still looking at sort of a 20% saving on our electric consumption. So there is that ongoing commitment and ongoing investment. But the actual sort of rollout of the hardware, so the investment in the actual kit, and the first year's subscription, that payback is around 2 years across the board for us.
Okay, I'm assuming the subscription, Adam, is for things like the dashboards and the fact that you're collating all the data in the cloud somewhere.
That's it. Yeah. So the subscription aspect of it is, it gives us that kind of data visualization, the reporting function of it, the actual machine learning algorithms that are working there to find that energy waste. Also, and there's one of the things that got touched on in one of the questions there as well, is that there is also an algorithm here that's working on identifying what each of these appliances are. And this is actually a very, very critical point in this, because, when you're looking at a perfect example here with Jim, with Francis Clark, you're never going to have the time, and no one's ever going to have the time to be going around and checking what's plugged into every plug socket. But by identifying what they are, and there's different levels of that identification. The least granular being that's a piece of office equipment, and the most being that is a laptop computer. There are levels in this, but even within those levels, knowing that it's office equipment or it's kitchen equipment is already crucial in being able to know whether or not you can turn it on or off. And suddenly you don't need that. And that's their work in the background. And what that means in reality is businesses can do absolutely whatever they want in terms of unplugging stuff, moving stuff around, changing meeting rooms, changing layouts, and the plug sockets do not care. As things get plugged back in again, all of the context there for being able to turn stuff on and off is just waiting, ready to go. So that's one of the key kind of parts of it as well.
I think I'd follow on from that, Adam, as well, by saying something I learned as we move through the rollout here, is we obviously each device has a serial, a very long, complicated serial number. We actually named every device on your dashboard, essentially. And
please tell me they were Star Wars characters.
No, not those kind of names, sadly. It was just desk one, nothing interesting. But we did tie that back to floor plans as well. So very quickly, where, not that it's only happened a handful of times, but if I did have somebody contact me and say, my plug's not working, I can say, what desk you at, what office, and I can literally pin that down to that bank of desks. And highlight the issue. And I think that helped us with some external problems we had with power supply, power surge problems that were throwing a whole bank of desks out. And we were, what it's like, anything new in the building, the people are straight to blame whatever it is that's new. So it was, the smart plugs are causing the problems. But I was able to say, look, it isn't. It's actually a circuit problem outside of the smart plug technology anyway. So that would be a top tip for me, is that you try and assign your devices to names, locations, whether it's a meeting room, whether it's a kitchen equipment, as Adam said, and you can really then nail down into the characteristics of how that device needs to perform. 98% of ours are desks, but we do still have these other devices as well. So that was also a very useful element for me as well.
We've had a very good question in from Glyn, actually. So Glyn, the question is, I have heard the system can identify unused equipment. An example is where a building has 3 printers, one is rarely used. So the system identifies that the landlord could remove and save the cost of a whole printer. Is that something you found, Jim or Anna or Adam? We certainly found, I think Anna touched on it as well, about meeting room equipment maybe not being used as much. Obviously we've got data around meeting room bookings, so we can see when a room has been booked, but we couldn't see if anybody turned up necessarily and turned the equipment on. So we've been able to sort of overlay that data over our meeting room bookings and see that, that particular meeting room, nobody ever uses the AV kit. Do we need it? In which case we can get rid of it. So that worked for us very well. But that's probably all we've experienced with it.
Yeah, and I would just say there's an element of, and it would probably form part of a lot of FM or estate management decisions around space optimization and just being really smart about the space that you're using. So this granular level of data allows you to be able to make smarter decisions about the space that you're using. And I think, again, I'll just reiterate the point that it's a two-way conversation between the landlord and the tenant. So if we're able, and we want to make sure consistently that these conversations are happening because they're healthy conversations to have. So if we've identified something that an area is not being utilized, then we can engage with the front of house staff, or we can, if it's part of a common area and the landlord's responsible for that, we can engage with front of house and identify how often is it being used. Is it accurate that actually the TV monitors and the AV, etc., don't need to be on at a certain given time? Likewise, for tenants' demises, we can have that two-way communication, because ultimately the tenant is in charge of the electricity consumption that they use there. But it's important for us as a landlord to help each other out in those decisions and make smarter decisions.
I've got a good question here from Chris. To what degree do you need a full refurbishment and rewiring to implement this, or could you just do the changeover at the level of the sockets? I guess the question is how easy it is to retrofit this system. So I get it. You know, are you having to change the infrastructure, or is it something you can plug and play?
From a customer point of view, it's incredibly simple plug and play. So you've got your desktop devices essentially that are just on a normal 3-pin plug on the other end. So if you've got floor boxes with extension leads on, you plug them directly into that. The fuse spurs devices and the sockets on walls are just a simple electrician swap out one for the other. So really, really easy to install and very quick to roll out.
Yeah.
Is this something I could use at home? I'm getting ideas here.
I've asked that as well.
We'll put you on the waiting list.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I get the feeling I'm going to be sort of further down.
And just from a landlord perspective as well, I think one of the things that attracted us in our earlier engagement is how easy it is to retrofit. So it's a retrofit, non-invasive, as little invasive as possible when it comes to changing sockets around. So we have got examples of where we've installed them retrospectively in existing common areas, for example. And Jim's obviously got the experience of retrofitting. But I would also say for us, it's also been important as part of the refurbishment to think about measurable energy from get-go, so that we're keeping our costs at a minimum. So we don't want to be in a scenario where we've already added all the plug sockets and then think about measurable energy as an afterthought. So it can play in both parts. But I would say one of the things that attracted us, and it's not the only solution that we've installed at Silbury, where it's completely non-invasive, very easy to retrofit in our building.
And I'd just add as well, guys, that you can take them with you. You know, we have moved offices within the same building. We've moved floors within the same building, and you just unplug, take it with you, plug it back in. You know, it is really that simple.
That's actually a really good point, because you think, oh, it's an investment, and then actually, oh, I can move this, it's portable. Yeah. And obviously if you lose desks, you can then use them elsewhere. No, I get that. That's really cool.
Yeah. We've had the same scenario where we've downsized a couple of desks, and then we've relocated those devices to another location, renamed them, and carried on. So you buy the hardware, you know, it is your property. That doesn't mean to say it's applicable, obviously, to communal spaces in landlord-owned buildings, but within our demise, we're in the process at the moment of trying to take more space in RO's building in Bristol. So we're going to need more devices, but we're also going to take our devices into that new space as well. So it really is that simple.
I'm going to ask this is slightly a bit of a sidebar, and there's another question I want to ask, actually, Jim, for you. But this is a techie question. How much energy does the measurable energy system use? Because obviously it must be drawing some power.
Yeah, I think this one's for me. So each socket individually uses less than half a watt in energy use. Now, I say less than half a watt because it does fluctuate ever so slightly depending on what it's doing, but that's the average. And we calculate its energy use in the dashboard against your, the use against the savings. So it's already accounted for its own energy use in there when we're calculating all these savings.
Okay, Glyn, that was such a techie question. So thank you for that. And Adam, thank you for answering. I want to go back to this slide here. So Jim,
yes.
You've got, power save 28, carbon dioxide 28. Why the miles driven while the kettle's boiled? What's that about?
That's a measurable energy statistic. That's not something that we've we haven't built this dashboard ourselves. This is what's provided to us. And for me personally, those points are very good publicized points I can push out quickly to people like our green team, because some people just look at the numbers and don't really understand what a kilowatt equates to. I mean, I couldn't claim to know myself, but when you can break it down into, that's like saving or boiling 150,000 kettles, people suddenly think, actually that is quite substantial, isn't it? Because everybody knows a kettle, uses a lot of power. I mean, we probably do boil 150,000 kettles in our offices, but it's
not doing a lot of work then.
yeah, but it's still a very good comparison. And the miles driven, I think, is actually quite relevant for us in our current, excuse the pun, in our current journey. Our next big focus is going to be on travel, and how we travel, how far we travel. Do we drive EVs? Do we drive petrol, diesel, catch the train, and so on? So those, for me, are just really two good little snippets of examples of quick and easy to understand the impact.
I'm looking forward to the measurable energy socket for EVs. Yeah, that's going to be great. Right, I want to go back, Jim. The Bristol office, why was it chosen for the pilot project? Was that just luck, or was there something behind it?
I think just timing. I think because of the relationship already with us, with RO as tenant and landlord, and it was their introduction to measurable energy. I was physically in Bristol when the conversation happened, and we figured we'd start there. It's also, Bristol's quite a good example because it's a medium-sized office for us, but it's got a huge growth rate at the moment, which is why we're expanding. But also, going back to the data and what trends it can show, Bristol office, because it's a city centre office full of essentially very sort of young trainees and people like that, it's quite a sociable space. So what I'm getting at is the habits in Bristol are very different to the habits in, say, our Taunton office, where you see the plugs come on at 9 o'clock and they turn off at 5. Whereas Bristol, I've got people in there from 6 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, because it's also a bit of a social space as well. So everything just sort of led us to thinking Bristol was a good one to trial it on. But that was it. There was no more sort of logic to it than that.
Okay. And in terms of then implementing this solution, this question for all three of you, actually, what were the things that surprised you? Yeah. What were like, oh, that was a bad thing, we got over it, or that was a good thing we weren't expecting? And I'll start with Anna, actually. Anna, why don't you come in on that one?
Yeah, and I think just to reiterate the point that Jim made about strategy, I think, strategic locations, it's important for us to know when and where and who are we going to ultimately influence in that decision-making process. So for us, I think during the implementation, particularly at Silbury House, it was important for us to look at the wider property and facilities management and asset strategy and incorporating measurable energy into that. We had conversations with our interior designers, for example, do we think the white color of the plug sockets actually suits? And I'm sitting in Silbury House today, and I can see the plugs in the desk that we've integrated here. So it's all about having these early conversations on and engaging with the team as early on as possible. That was one of the things that we found. The other comment I would make, and again, it's probably not an operational one, but I would say that a lot of people tend to forget about the low-hanging fruit, trying to tick off really, really big measures. And admittedly, at Silbury House, we have gone, in terms of large scale, we have got 116 solar panels up on the roof, and we've got 30% EV charging provisions outside the building. So we have thought about the larger scale things. But for my strategy and for our group sustainability strategy, I think it's really important to look at low-hanging fruit and actually seeing where you can take some quick wins and integrate them as part of early engagement between the landlord, the tenant, and all the other partners and stakeholders involved in the refurbishment of this. Because ultimately, if we're thinking about the wider measurement side of things, if we're looking at scope 3 and the supply chain and everything else that comes into it, these are all very healthy conversations to have, head on right at the start. And then just thinking about the technicalities of implementing this within tenant demises. As I said, at Silbury House, we've got Cat A plus fit out on the ground floor, which will ultimately, some of these suites will be occupied by tenants. So it's really important to have the data sharing conversation early on and the benefit that this brings. So for Silbury House, we have implemented green leases with our tenants, and we've had these very strong conversations from pre-proposals to all the way to post-occupation, so that our tenants are comfortable and we're comfortable with sharing some of the obligations around consumption, for example. So that's just obviously some of the technicalities that you need to consider when you're installing smart devices as part of your strategy. And then things that we found out during the process, there will be things like, oh, one socket's not working, but the team have been very readily available to come in and rectify any potential issues that we might have had during the deployment phase or the installation phase. And again, similarly, not everybody's got the time, and not everybody is a data nerd like me, but actually bringing somebody on board who can understand how simple the dashboard is and what to use it for, so that it doesn't just become an afterthought, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I might just go and have a look at that and see. And the other thing is, when you're looking at the wider, smarter building strategy, which obviously we're working quite heavily on, we've got air sensor quality monitoring ongoing at Silbury House, for example, all the time, is about thinking how you can connect all of these things together. And that's where Jim will probably be, a tech nerd, would understand that actually ultimately that there can be an opportunity to connect some of these dashboards with your own overarching building strategy through an API. So it's about thinking about the practicalities as well as to how are you going to actually monitor this consistently and then track performance and then change things so that you can improve consistently. But in a nutshell, think about it operationally, strategically, low-hanging fruit. If there's one thing that you can remember, look at your low-hanging fruit from a sustainability strategy as well, because they can actually help you in the long term.
Jim?
I think sort of lessons learned from me with rollout, as I mentioned earlier, Bristol served as our sort of guinea pig. So we took a lot of lessons from that, one of which was sort of pre-establishing rule sets. We didn't really know what they looked like within Bristol, so we just sort of set everything to a standard rule set, and then had to tweak that as we went along. So with the next office, I approached, partners in that office and said, can you give me some more detail around the habits of your office and your staff, so we could do those rule sets sort of predefined before we rolled it out. Also quite a lot, I would say, around a bit of publication, so a bit of information to staff and users. This is what we're doing, why we're doing it, this is what they look like, this is the button you press if you need more power. Just a bit of a user guide was also very useful on the following offices we did. So Bristol had it a little bit rough because we were learning, but then as we've rolled it out, it's got easier and easier. As far as the actual implementation goes, very non-intrusive. It would normally be an electrician would be in over the weekend to do all the hardwired stuff, and then the measurable energy team would be in changing the desks on the pods of desks, as that we didn't have to close an office or send people home or anything. Really, really simple, straightforward process. But I think with Sam at Measurable Energy, who I deal with, we've learned, as each office has come on board, we've learned lessons for the next one, to make it as easy and quickly as possible.
Okay, Adam, I know we need to move on. So we haven't got that long. There are a couple more slides to go through, but bear with me. There's a couple of questions. So can the system be linked? So Adam, I think this is probably best for you. Can the system be linked to incoming power measurement? I.e., think of a building with 100 amp supply, which is working at 80 amp peak. The user wants to add a 25 amp load. Can the system turn off non-essential loads, i.e. water heaters, when the incoming load is reaching capacity, and turn back on again when demand subsides?
Yeah, sure. The short answer is yes. It can, not out of the box in how it exists right now, but every aspect of it is API-able. So we can API control to set up linking to an incoming supply, and then have an API that turns off non-essential loads at the time that it needs to.
Okay, and then another question: where is the cloud data stored? Some UK organisations will not allow data to be stored, processed outside the UK. Good question.
Yeah, no, great question. Cybersecurity is an extremely important part. These sockets use Wi-Fi, so very, very critical in how we've been able to scale. All data is in the UK on UK servers. We have loads of cybersecurity features in here. It's all documented. We share it with IT teams. Everything's encrypted, and everything's also third-party certified. We've got multiple certifications, and with that, we've been able to go into military manufacturing and banks and financial institutions and things like that.
Okay, yeah, okay. If you're doing it with them, you're doing it with anyone. Right. Why don't we move on to the next slide? If there are any other questions, please get them in. We'll try and get them fitted in the next 5 minutes. But Adam, if you just want to wrap up for us as well.
Yeah, sure. So look, I think we've got, we had a really good discussion, and I think we've got lots of points out. So I'll try and sort of, keep it, relatively brief. But, this is really all about pinpointing that waste detection. I think we've had multiple, examples there of how this works in doing it. Automating these shutdowns. We don't want people to have to be involved in turning things on and off. That is a job that an automated system can do very well. We touched on it here about the behavioral insights. And the fact that we can see, within one company, different behaviors in different offices, and how that then translates into savings. And the whole thing we're trying to create here is something that is is trackable and is providing trustworthy savings. We don't want to be artificially creating high baselines to then compare against. It's about reporting exactly what the real world conditions are showing and what those savings are. So yeah, just to kind of wrap it all up. Smart sockets and AI. This is our way of providing a precise, automated kind of energy management system that fills that gap that's left by the BMS. We're going after actual energy usage, not assumptions, and it allows us to project out what all future savings are going to be, because we're cutting that waste out, before it happens.
Okay. I'm going to ask. Oh no, sorry, you still got one more. My apologies.
Oh, no, sorry. No. I think we can.
Okay. Why don't we go to the last slide? Because if anyone wants information, then this is where you can get access to it. So Adam's a great guy, but he hasn't put his email address on here. So he's if you do want to give your email address, let me know. I'm going to wrap it up by asking really for Anna and Jim to say a couple of words. So very quickly, you two, if another company came to you asking for advice about energy reduction, what would you say about measurable energy? And 3 words. Listen, I'll put you on the spot. So Anna, 3 words that you would say about measurable energy.
Data-focused solution, low-hanging fruit. If there was one thing you could take, and also
that's more than 3 words,
yeah,
but I like them. So that's very good. So that's all you need. And Jim.
I would say innovative, cost-effective, should we say?
Yeah.
And supportive. Those would be my
that's very
words.
good. I like that.
Yeah.
Now, I think that is a good way to finish, actually. So I'd just like to say thank you to our audience. Thank you for the questions. They've been great. If you can please rate us, that helps us to be able to give you much better webinars in the future. This has been a brilliant one, though, so I've really enjoyed it. So thank you to Jim, thank you to Anna, thank you to Adam. If we've unanswered or we've left questions, then we will get back to you. But I'd just like to say to everyone, thank you very much. And if you could all say goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and look forward to seeing you at the next one. We'll see you later. Cheers.
Thank you.